Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being on today's event. The topic for today's webinar is The Future of Work is Now, How to Launch Your Remote Workforce with EUC. Today's event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and produced by ActualTech Media. My name is David Davis of ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. We want this to be an educational event. This is part of our EUC Masterclass series. Hopefully you have seen all that's in store in this event. You should have received invitations to previous events if this is your first event that you're joining in the series. If you were able to join our previous events in the series, then kudos to you, because it's been a great series here. We covered giant steps and baby steps, standing up EUC and enabling user access, working from home alone, keeping the bad guys out, and managing chaos. The topic of today's event, of course, is the future of work is now. So thank you for joining us on this one. This is actually the final event in the series. So a great series that it has been. Before we kick it off, of course, we want this to be educational. So we encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session, or at least trying to answer all the questions that we can electronically. We also have a number of resources there in the handouts tab. You can check those out. They are the Nutanix Next Magazine link, also the Work From Anywhere link, which goes along with today's topic. I like this, productivity in pajamas. You can learn about, if you go there, how to scale your VDI environment and how to deploy virtual desktops from the cloud. So I see a lot of comments coming in. Thank you, everyone. Of course, we appreciate those. Welcome to everyone out there in the audience. Of course, we always appreciate your time and are so thankful to have the ActualTech Media audience joining us on these events. If you're watching this on demand, the prize drawing has already occurred, but for those who are on the live event here, I will be announcing the winner of the Visa $300 gift card at the end of today's presentation. Full prize terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. All right, and with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Brian Suhr, Principal Technical Marketing Engineer at Nutanix. Brian is legendary in the industry, especially when it comes to VDI. I've known Brian for many years, and it's a pleasure to have him once again on today's event. Brian, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you. Take it away.
Hello, and welcome to EUC Masterclass Series, presented by Nutanix. This is part 3 in the series, and today we're going to be talking about application catalogs and some of the user access details. Welcome. My name is Brian Suhr, and I'm a Principal Tech Marketing Engineer here at Nutanix. Published a book on architecting UC solutions. You can find the first version in Amazon store, and the second version will be available free as a digital property and as some limited print copies from Nutanix. So you may see them at trade shows in the near future, and probably ask for them from your account teams also. Some great details in there, and all the stuff we've been talking about in the series, as well as a wealth of more details, are available in each of those books. So just a quick refresh, we touch on this in each of the parts of the series. All the details that we're talking about today really apply to both. So there's virtual desktops, which is typically run on-prem. So these would be things like VMware Horizon, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. And those are excellent solutions to run on the Nutanix hyper-converged platform. And then you have more of the DaaS approach, which is desktop as a service. It's a service, typically a cloud control plane. So we have Nutanix Frame, and then each of the Citrix and VMware also has some offerings there. So we'll talk and give some examples of Frame in this, as well as the other solutions. And then also Frame can also control desktops that run on Nutanix HCI clusters that are running HV as a hypervisor. So it gives you a nice hybrid option there. First up, when dealing with applications and obviously desktops, is you really need to define those requirements, and I tend to harp on this, and what kind of you want your experience, what experience you want from your users to have when it comes to the applications. So how are they going to consume the services, right? Hopefully you've defined this already. If you haven't, we'll kind of just do a quick refresh, right? Are they going to just get virtual desktops? Means they're going to log into typically a Windows desktop. Their data will be there. They'll consume applications that are in their desktop. Or will you just present them applications, such as, typically RDSH is the most common here, where they'll log into a client, they'll see some applications, they'll launch them. It will feel like a traditional, application experience, but they're just consuming that application. Or, typically it's not uncommon to do both, right? So you'll present desktops. Sometimes they'll have a need to just consume an application, or maybe they'll consume the application actually inside of the virtual desktop itself, and that's commonly referred to as a double hop, right? You log into the desktop and then you also consume a virtual app inside of that. And then probably more on par with what we're talking about in this part of the series is how will they request access to applications or make changes. Do they need a different version of an application, or they want to add an application, right? So you could auto assign them, right? So if you understand the use cases very well, and the use cases are very rigid, like accounting only gets these 5 apps, there's really no change. When we need to maybe give a new version, then everybody in there gets a new version. So that's pretty easy to deal with, and we'll be talking about some ways that you can deal that. Or you could use traditional methods, like they can submit a ticket. So if they want an application added or changed, they put in a ticket, and somebody deals with it on the operations side of thing, to handle that change. They could manually do it, or it could be some kind of other method, maybe an automated method. So you could build custom automation, which could be scripts or some kind of orchestration product. That they could go to a portal, or maybe the automation was as a result of the ticket, like we previously mentioned. So maybe if I put in a ticket saying that I need to request Visio in my virtual desktop, once that ticket is, say, approved by my manager or some manager, then that ticket kicks off an automated workflow, which it just automatically pushes out Visio into my virtual desktop, or assigns me that app via RDSH as an example, right? So automation could be a piece there. You could just simply, handle it with the Active Directory groups, right? So based on different criteria, right? So if go back to the accounting example, right? So accounting has just 5 applications, everybody gets them. So rather than installing them in, an image as an example, I could have some mechanism that presents those applications. And the trigger to present those applications to the accounting users is they all belong to some group in an Active Directory, right? And then just by simply adding people or adding them or removing them from that group is the mechanism to control who gets to see those applications. And then if there's an upgrade of one of those, then we just upgrade it, and doesn't change who's assigned to it. Or you could have some type of specific application to accomplish this, more of an enterprise app store type approach, where they would go to some portal. The portal would typically probably show them the applications that are presented to them already, and then give them kind of a shopping cart experience, where it shows, hey, you also potentially have access to a bunch of other applications. Some of these you can just choose to install them and they'll push it right out. Some may have an approval workflow where you request the application, and then somebody's got to log in there and click that they approve it before it actually assigns it to say your account, or push it into your virtual desktop as an example. That's a nice experience, but typically those require an extra product, right? So you're paying additional licensing, probably quite expensive actually, or you're buying a third-party product to do that. So they're not, as popular out in the deployments for that. So we're going to look at, this is, called a frame launchpad, right? So when a user opens up a browser and logs into a frame session, they're going to see the launchpad. And the launchpad is going to show them any desktops they have assigned to them, any applications. So the one we're looking at here is just purely application based. I've got a whole bunch of applications that are assigned to me as the example, and then if I click any of those applications, it's going to launch a session and present that application to me so that I can consume it. And on the back side, which I'll give you an example of, the operations team can control what is presented to each of these launch pads. And as a user, I could actually have multiple launch pads. So if I was maybe a member of 2 different groups, I could have the accounting one again as example. I'd see those 5 accounting apps, and maybe I also did some other tasks, and those applications were separated on another launch pad. They could just entitle me to those, and then I could just click the button up in the little square in the top in the middle, and that would show you my other launch pads that I could see to consume those applications. This is very similar to look and feel. It looks a bit different, but similar feel on how Citrix would present it, either through a web browser or through their client, and also the same way for VMware Horizon, right? When you log into those clients, whether it's the desktop client or through a browser, you're going to again see the applications, if any that are presented to you, and any desktop pools, you would see them listed there so that you could consume those, and then you would click on the icon and either log into your desktop or your application. So it's an easy experience for the end user to consume, and then any desktop, any new apps or desktops that are assigned to them automatically appear. So once they make a request through any of the mechanisms that we discussed, they're just automatically going to pop up here next time they log in, or if they hit the refresh, they're going to see what's available to them. This is an example of through VMware Workspace, a part of their greater EUC. It is an additional uplift that you either have to probably buy their highest licensing tier or buy it a la carte. But it does give the option of where you can request applications to install. Again, I think to most organizations this might not be worth the cost, but it does give you kind of that shopping cart of feel, and I believe there's workflow system that you can add approvals or just let it automatically install for that. So really determine whether it's worth the cost to have that additional experience, when I think it can be pretty easily accomplished through other mechanisms and still have a great end user experience. Next up is how to present those applications. So there's a wealth of different ways. I'm certainly not going to cover them all. I'm just going to kind of touch on some of the more common and popular mechanisms for this. So the first would be to locally install them, right? So if we're thinking about virtual desktops here, basically, we're going to just install those applications into the image, right? This is also kind of referred to as baking them into your image. But basically, you're taking your Windows image, and then you're just going to install the apps in there. And then anybody who gets presented that image typically gets all those applications, right? So then the question is, does everyone get all of the apps that are, basically if I have 50 apps in a company or 400 apps in a company, I hope nobody puts 400 apps in a single image, but I've seen, crazier things, right? So if everybody doesn't get all the applications, then you're going to need to deal with that in one of many different ways. So the most common is you're probably going to need different images. So if you're baking them in, you're going to need different application combinations, right? So if you can build your base image with Windows and any tools and even any apps that everybody in the company gets, and then from there, then you're going to have to subdivide those into multiple images. And you don't want to end up with 20 or 50 images ideally, but if you end up 2, 3, or 4 or 5 images, that's probably pretty manageable if you can accomplish your tasks goals that way. So you again would have your base things that everybody would get, and then you would just not layer in, but install in your application, so you have different images, and then you assign those images out to the pools, to the users that get them. And the great news is that's free. It's a free way to do it. It's a little bit of a lift in the operational side of things, but not terrible, and then allows you some level of flexibility to do that. The other option is there are different tools that allow you to mask the applications. What that means is the applications are actually installed in the OS, but you're masking them so the end user can't see them. And they do them in different ways. Sometimes they just simply hide the executables, or they just hide the icons, the shortcuts from the user. But if a user was nosy and went looking around, they could actually dig around in the folder structure and find them and potentially run them. Now, most users aren't going to do that, so you have to just figure out what mechanism you would do and whether that's going to meet your needs. But the good news is, if you were, say, in the 20 or 30 application range that you wanted to bake into an image, and then that could actually serve, say, 5 or 6 different use cases, then you could get down to 1 image or less images to manage, and then just use masking. So the masking would, again, probably be based on Active Directory groups, and then you could have a single pool that those 5 or 6 use cases would log in, and then based upon the credentials that they log in and the group assignments that you did with the masking would determine which applications they get to use. So it's just a way to provide some flexibility into a free mechanism, and that can be done with tools through Microsoft. A lot of the profile management tools have some mechanism that they could do this also. Another option is you could use application layer, right? So you can layer in the applications. This is usually done in conjunction with some locally installed applications. So if you think about, everybody in the organization, they all get Acrobat Reader, they all get maybe an unzipping program, they all get Microsoft Office, right? If everybody gets things, you're going to be typically best off to install those, bake them into your image, and then just layer on the departmental and user apps with layering solutions. And there's a number of layering solutions out there, right? So you're really deciding, am I going to layer all my apps or just some of them? As well as I think most people, are more in the camp that you're going to do some, right? You're not going to do all of them. Now, in the gist of things, you may do a lot of them. If your organization, again, has hundreds of apps, then you're potentially capturing and creating layers of all those applications. And most of the layering apps will allow you to bundle them together and create like layers that have multiple applications in them to make it easier for assignment for that. Because again, you typically don't want to, like if you have to layer in 20 apps, you hopefully don't want to have 20 individual layers that you log in, because that can, with different products, affect like logon times and performance and things like that. So you may want some layers that have multiple apps, and kind of figure out of, company-based apps, departmental apps, and then like one-off apps. So kind of like a tiered approach on how you do that. And then last up, most common is application presentation. So this would be, like RDSH for Microsoft. It would be Citrix, app presentation, and Horizon does RDSH, and Frame can present applications, as you saw also from the previous example. And in here you're using, virtual machines in the background that are typically multi-user, and then they're just presenting the application to the user, and they're all sharing that OS. There's going to be multiple people sharing that OS instance. Now, the nice thing here is you get to granularly assign applications to users, right? So you're directly assigning them to users or groups of users, and it gives you that flexibility. So again, if you kind of think about virtual desktops, if that's the use case, I can bake in the apps and the image that everyone gets, and then now just the departmental and user apps that are more granular, I can then assign those via RDSH and have fine-grained access to what users get to use. And that's easy to remove like the old version and assign a new version as an example to deal with upgrades. Or maybe they need access to multiple versions, so it's a great way to handle things like that. So an example on the back side on Frame here, right, we're looking at the Frame Administrator panel. This is our sandbox image, or gold image, if you want to think about that, right? This is where we would install the applications. Frame automatically picks up and shows the icons for any applications that are installed in our sandbox image, and then you have the choice whether you're going to present those on the launch pad. So on the right side of the screen there, you see the applications that would be assigned out to any of the users that are part of this launch pad. So a real simple, modern experience from the administrator side to make this easy. Next up is how do you know who needs what? So you need to know which apps go to which users, and I tend to harp on requirements a lot, right? So the upfront discovery is important, right? So when you figure out the use cases, you need to define those use cases based upon their requirements, and then part of those requirements, what apps do they require, right? Because we don't want to just broadly assign applications like we mentioned before. Like if I have 50 applications or 400, I don't want to just assign them to everybody in the company. There's going to be licensing implications, like the Visio example, right? If I've got a few hundred people in the organization, there's probably just a handful, maybe 5 or 10 people that need Visio, not all 400 of them. So that's a big difference in licensing cost. And there's a lot of applications out there, right, that you're going to pay expensive licensing for to use, and just a subset of people use them. So you need that granular control. And then even within a group, like say the accounting group, as an example, does everybody need the same applications, right? They may all use those same apps, 5 apps that I've been talking about, but then within there may just be a handful of people that need some specialized piece of accounting software that's expensive, and we don't want to assign it to everybody. So how are you going to deal with that, right? Are you going to layer it in? Are you going to use RDSH to present to those subset of users? Would it be installed and then you just unmask it for the few people, right? So you need a plan to deal with those one-offs. And that plan, first you need to know, do I have any of these one-offs? I'm sure you will. And then, how am I going to organize my use cases, the requirements? And then when you have all that, then you can make a good, sound decision on how you're going to deal with those applications. Are you going to bake them in? Are you going to layer them? You're going to use RDSH? Maybe I need all of them for the flexibility. But you can make that decision based upon requirements and project goals, rather than just I know how to do X, or I already own X product X or mechanism Y as an example, and let that don't let that choose your decision ideally. And then what about resource changes, right? So a little less common than adding or removing applications, but it does happen on a regular basis. So users maybe need to add applications, or they're trying to do some special end-of-month project and end-of-year, or just some short-term project, and they want more resources, right? We don't know if these requests are permanent. Sometimes they are, sometimes it's just short-term, right? So they may ask for more memory, more CPU, or both. What if they temporarily need a GPU, or now they've changed jobs and they need a GPU to perform work permanently? So most organizations do not just give GPUs to everybody. They're still quite expensive, even for on-prem. They do add cost, so they're not widely pervasive. So how would I deal with that? So typically how these things are executed for on-prem VDI is you would typically have to assign them to a new pool, right? Unless they're persistent desktops, like they're full clones where you can go in and change an individual one. But if they're pooled desktops, like they're non-persistent, which is a lot of users are, you have to adjust the resources at a pool level. So you would typically have to then, if you had another pool available that had the right resources, and you could deal with their application presentation by some other mechanism, then I could just reassign them to another desktop pool that had the right resources. Or maybe I have to create a new desktop pool to have the resources. But the clue is, typically in Citrix and VMware and the more VDI-based approach, is you're going to have to reassign the users to a different pool of desktops to deal with that. And certainly in the case of GPU, right, you'd have to have some nodes with GPUs in them, and you have a pool of desktops that have GPU-based resources assigned to them, and then I'd reassign my user in there. Framework's a little bit different, especially if you're using the cloud for it. Again, we're looking at the operations side, the administrator panel, and we're looking at the launch pad. So we're managing an existing launch pad. You can see in the middle there where it says instance pools. What we can actually do is we can choose the size of the instances that are backing, say, our virtual desktops for this group of users that's using this launch pad. And typically for most, you'd probably just turn on one of these switches and you would just provide them one instance slide. So in the example here, just the Air 4 gig, so it's a VM with 4 gigabyte of memory is assigned. But there are a few other instance types based upon an AWS that have been selected and are available for us to use in our frame instance. You can see the top two that are just called Air, those have different resources. And then the bottom two, the Pro ones add GPU to each of them. So they get more memory, more CPU, but then they also have GPU capabilities. Now, if I wanted to give the users ability to switch their instance type, so whether they need to do it permanently or just short term, you could literally, if I enabled, say, the Pro 16 gig one, which give them a GPU, as you can see, I've highlighted that, it upgrades their resources and gives them 1 GPU to use. So if I did that, they could actually just go to the Launchpad, choose that Pro version of instance type, and then they could use that GPU, say, for a couple hours, a day, 3, 4, 5 days, permanently, whatever. So if I just needed it for one day, I could switch the instance type, it would spin up one of those, I could use it, and then when I'm done, I'll close my session, go back and change it back to the Air 4 gig, and now I'm just back consuming. So I get that flexibility in instance size, and it's very easy to set up. What's it look like on the end user side of things? So this is the Launchpad as it looks like for a user. And you can see down in the lower right, if you click on the instance size, it shows you the one that's chosen and the other ones that are available. So in this example, I don't have any GPU instances. I just have an Air 4 gig and an 8 gig. But if I just needed more memory and CPU, I could switch over to the 8 gig size one, and it would up my resources. And then I could potentially use that permanently or just, again, short time use, so that I could burst and get some work done. Maybe it's just an end of the month thing and I need it for a day or a week to close out my work. So it gives you that flexibility without the heavy lift of, switching users to different pools, creating a new pool to deal with that, those types of things. And then briefly, just through these, I'll kind of rehype on, I won't go through all these, but understanding the use cases, we've talked about this in all 3 parts of the masterclass, is it's very important to understand your use cases, figure out how to group the users, what their requirements are, why it's important. It's going to come up in all your design decisions as you look through security and applications and instance sizes and what kind of peripherals do I have to support, etc. Right? This is so important in all those different pieces. And then, just access, right? What am I going to allow them to access? Where can they access it from? Again, that all comes back to what are the requirements so that I can design against those. And that brings us to the end of part 3 and the masterclass in general. I want to thank everyone for attending, and hope you learned a good bit along the way. Thank you.
Great presentation, Brian. Always appreciate your insight and expertise on VDI and EUC topics. This has been a really excellent series here, the EUC Master Series. Thank you so much to Nutanix for supporting this event series. And of course, thank you to everyone out there in our audience for supporting today's event. Before we go, I want to announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card. That's going out to Eric Gadley from Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Eric Gadley from Pennsylvania. We'll reach out to you to deliver your prize. After this event, everyone will be automatically redirected to our events website. Feel free to register for any other future events. We've got a big EcoCast or MegaCast event coming up tomorrow on virtualization optimization, so we hope to see you there as well. Finally, I want to remind everyone out there in the audience to join, to download the handouts there. Check out the handouts, the Nutanix Next magazine, and the Work From Anywhere resource link over at Nutanix.com. You can find those in the handouts tab. Thank you everyone who joined us on today's webinar. We hope that you learned a lot. Have a great day. See you next time.